Good morning and welcome to the EQ Skills Clinic. If you are new around here, let me take a moment to introduce myself and introduce you to the conversation that we are about to have. My name is Dr. Shamla. I'm a podcast host, a media expert for national television, and I'm the very proud founder of the EQ Code, where we help high-performing women transform their relationships by accessing and executing on emotional intelligence skills. I'm also the very proud founder of the Kiru Psychotherapy Clinic, where I lead an incredible team of practitioners. So I know that there are quite a few new faces around here, so I want to personally welcome you here. I'm so glad that you found us. I'm so glad that you found this little corner of the internet, this little corner of Facebook land, and that you're with us. I think you're in really, really good company. We have a pretty awesome group of women that join us every single week, whether it is live or for the replay for what you're about to experience, which is the EQ Skills Clinic. So let me tell you a little bit about how these weekly lives usually go down. It is an opportunity for you to access, execute, and practice the skills necessary for you to really build your emotional intelligence. This is your time. So I would really encourage you to carve out, I usually go for about 30 minutes, carve out about 30 minutes every single week. You can join me live every single Thursday at 10 a.m. if you'd like to interact and ask questions. And I know that many of you will join the replay. So whether you are here live or whether you are catching me on replay, can you give me, if you're here live, give me a hello, drop an emoji for me, give me a little bit of love. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Krista. So glad to see you guys. Chantel, good to see you. So if you're here live, give me a hello, will you? And if you're joining the replay, please give us a hashtag replay so that we know that you are catching us later on in the day. And if you have any questions, we can circle back and we can support you. So the Skills Clinic is meant to be practical. It's meant to be something that you can actually utilize in your day-to-day life. And the best way to do that is to show up regularly, to really engage with the content, and to have a notebook with you. I always encourage you to have a notebook with you so you can take down some notes, you can take down some tips, some strategies, and some questions for reflection. All right. Brianna, nice to see you. Okay. All right, friends. So I'm going to get started today. And if you've been around for a little while, I don't know if you noticed something different. Do you guys notice something different that's happening here? I'm standing up. And I know you can't see it. I know you can't see that I'm actually, or maybe you can tell, I don't know, because I'm still sort of like head and shoulders up here. But I thought I would try something a little bit different this morning. I thought I would try standing up just so that, you know, the energy is different. So you guys will have to let me know if the energy feels any different with me standing up rather than sitting down. And to be honest with you, you know, the past year I have been sitting in my home office day in and day out, and I needed to be on my feet today. So that's the difference. All right. Today's session is going to look a little different than what I normally do. I'm going to be teaching on leadership skills today, which is not unusual. It is one of the aspects of emotional intelligence that I really enjoy teaching on. But the real difference today, I would say, from most of our sessions is I'm not going to give you any tips. I'm not going to give you any tips, and I'm not going to give you any strategies today. But I hope that you will stay with me. What I'm going to give you instead is an opportunity to really shift your paradigm. I want to give you an opportunity to really transform and change the way that you think about what I believe to be the most important aspect of success. I want to give you an opportunity to really change the way that you see what I consider to be the most critical aspect of your leadership, and that is your self-image. So today, what I really want to talk about is this paradigm that so many of us female leaders, female entrepreneurs, female practitioners, clinicians. I know that there are a lot of you that either listen to the podcast or watch me here inside the EQ Lab and connect with this content. And I've really come to understand that one of the greatest paradigms that will get us stuck and that will limit us in terms of our capacity for contribution is this idea of being a good girl. Okay. And so as you're listening to my words, I want you to ask yourself, do you find yourself or have you found yourself stuck in this paradigm of being the good girl? And we're going to unpack a little bit more what that actually looks like. And in fact, if you're here with me live, I want you to let me know. I want you to let me know if you get stuck in being the good girl. And if you understand almost immediately and intuitively what I mean when I say that there is this paradigm that exists, particularly for females, and I would say for high performing, high achieving females, around being a good girl. The statement, "You're such a good girl." You know, I can remember so vividly what it was like to hear those words. It felt really good. I remember what that was like growing up. It felt like I had hit the mark, right? It felt like I had made the right choice. I knew that I was playing by the rules. I knew that I had earned the approval of the people that I seek that approval from, right? I knew that I had earned the approval that I so deeply desired. Oh, it almost felt delicious to hear the words, "You're such a good girl." And it's almost visceral for me. I can feel it right now, even as I'm talking with you, right? Even as I'm sharing that story and reliving, the countless experiences that I've had in my life where I just, sort of relished in those moments where I heard the words, "You're such a good girl." And if you're with me, can you relate to that? Can you relate to that feeling? Do you know that feeling? Have you had that feeling? Do you perhaps still long for that feeling now, right? Of being told, "You're a good girl, you're getting it right, you're playing by the rules, you've pleased me, you've made me happy." Stay with that. Does that resonate for you? And as I got older, and when I say older, for those of you that don't know, I'm in my mid 40s. I'm 44 right now at the time that I'm live doing this recording, right? And when I say as I got older, it took me until I was probably well into my 30s where I really began to wonder, right? I really began to wonder, what would happen if I didn't make the right choice? What would happen if I didn't make the choice that had already been selected for me? What would happen if I didn't play by the rules? What would happen if I didn't play by the rules that society told me to play by, that perhaps my culture told me to play by, perhaps that my family of origin told me to play by, right? What would happen if I didn't play by the rules? And what would happen? What would happen if I didn't gain approval? What would happen if I didn't have the approval of everyone around me? What would happen if I didn't have the approval of the people that mattered most? Something I didn't realize until I started the process of writing my book. I'm still in the process of writing my book. And I have an amazing team that is working with me in putting this book together. And part of this book tells my own journey. Just like a lot of the conversations that we have, whether it's here inside the EQ Lab or on my podcast, I really believe in showing up fully and completely and authentically. So I will often tell you about my own struggles. And, it wasn't until I was in the process of writing my book that I realized that I went from seeking my parents' approval and primarily my mother's approval. For me, I had a very close relationship with my mom. I'm the eldest of three. I I wanted her approval so badly. And she gave me lots of it. She gave me lots of approval, lots of affirmations. But of course, I'm human, right? And I couldn't get it 100% right 100% of the time. I couldn't always get it right. I couldn't always make the right choice. I couldn't always please her. I couldn't always make her happy. And that was devastating for me in those moments where I knew I wasn't being the good girl, where I knew I didn't have the approval I so longed for. So it wasn't until I was in the process of writing my book that I finally realized, I connected the dots in my own life, that, wait a minute, I went from seeking my mother's approval to seeking my husband's approval. I went from seeking my mom's stamp of approval, her blessing, her, you're doing amazing, you got it right, you're such a good girl, yes, that's a good choice. I went from seeking my mother's approval. I didn't get married until I was 31, by the way, right? So this was in my 30s. I went from seeking my mother's approval to seeking my husband's approval. And I had no idea I was doing it because it wasn't always obvious. It's not like I stood there in the kitchen having a conversation with him saying, okay, so I think I'm going to change my workout time from 6 a.m. to 5:30 a.m., which means this is going to impact your schedule. And do I have your approval to do that? It wasn't like that. It wasn't overt. It wasn't direct. But indirectly and covertly, I constantly sought his approval on any and all decisions, right? So I want you to think about this. I want you to think about this. What would it be like if you didn't make I'm using air quotes here for those of you that are just listening on audio, the right choice? What if you didn't make those choices that perhaps have been pre-selected for you? What if you didn't make those? What if you didn't choose the career that has been pre-selected for you? What if you didn't choose the path or the plan that was pre-selected for you? What if you didn't choose the sequence of life events that might have been predetermined or pre-selected for you? Right? What if you didn't do that? What would happen? What would it be like? What would be different in your life right now if you didn't play by the rules? What would happen if you didn't play by the rules? What would be different in your life? How would you feel? How would you feel if you could be free enough to not have to play by the rules? If you could make your own rules, if you could challenge rules, if you could redefine rules in your life, what would happen? And the biggest question, my friend, I really want you to ask yourself, because listen, this question that I really want you to ask yourself is a question that I continue to ask myself every single day. It's a question that I remind myself every single time that longing for approval comes back up inside me, because I can promise you, I still feel that longing at times. It still comes up. It comes up every time I'm about to take a risk. It comes up every time I'm about to make a decision where there's uncertainty. And just a word about that, most decisions have an element of uncertainty. It's just how life goes. It comes up every time I'm about to do something that challenges the rules and the norms and the narratives that I was handed down. Right? It happened when I decided to let my hair go gray. I joke, my hair was already going gray. I've been going gray since I was 16 years old. But a year ago, I decided I was going to stop fighting it and embrace it, and now I love it. But that longing and that worry around approval came up for me during that time. So I still haven't asked you the question that I want you to ask yourself, the one that is so critical to you showing up as fully as you possibly could, the one that I truly believe will free you to be the most beautiful, radiant, and vibrant version of yourself. What would it be like if you didn't need, you didn't look for, you didn't seek, you didn't long for other people's approvals? What if you didn't need their approval of your choices? What if you didn't need their approval of your thoughts, your feelings, your desires, your wants, your needs? What if you didn't need the approval of others? What would be different? What would be different for you? How would your thinking be different? How would your decision making be different? How would you feel as you moved through your day? How would you feel as you moved through your day if you were not weighing every decision, every thought, every feeling, every conversation around longing and looking for approval? What would be different? What would be different? You know, the narrative of being a good girl, it actually defined much of my life. As I've shared with you, I'm 44, right? And I only really began to change this narrative, if I were to be really honest, in the last, I was going to say 10 years, but let me be even more honest than that. I think really probably the last 7 to 8 years, right? It's been less than a decade. And I've been doing this work as a professional, and I've been doing this work personally for 2 decades, right? So this narrative defined much of my life, most of my life. And at 44, I can honestly say that when I finally began to welcome all parts of myself, that is when I really began to tap into something truly transformative. When I stopped trying to hide the parts of myself that I thought others wouldn't like or wouldn't approve of or wouldn't accept, that's when things really, really and truly began to shift for me. When I stopped focusing constantly, because I used to focus constantly on what others thought of me. I used to focus constantly on whether or not, and this wasn't just in my personal life, you know, we're talking leadership here. I was teaching a 2-day intensive that wrapped up earlier this week to a group of women. And one of the things we talked about during that intensive is this idea that how we show up and who we show up as personally absolutely hands down affects who and how we show up professionally, who we show up as and how we show up professionally, right? So this piece around seeking approval, this piece around this narrative of being the good girl, playing by the rules, getting it right, it permeates every single aspect, every single part of our lives. There are so many things, small things, guys, small things that I would stop myself from doing when I was caught and stuck in that narrative for so long. And it wasn't just at home. It was at my clinic. It was at work. It was regardless of what the context was, because it was me that was showing up with all of my stuff. If you've been hanging around with me for any length of time, you would know that I deeply believe that confidence, true confidence, like real confidence, begins with self-acceptance. Self-acceptance for me is the first stepping stone of building confidence, right? And before we can move towards self-acceptance, we need self-awareness. So there's a framework actually that builds self-confidence. And so for me, that journey towards confidence really began with challenging the good girl narrative, right? It began with challenging that good girl narrative. I began to write a new narrative. I began to tell a new story about who I am and who I am allowed to be in this world, right? I began to tell myself a new story that allowed me to make space for all parts of myself, the ones that I feel really proud about, and I feel really good about, and the ones and the areas where I'm still growing and I'm still um, really imperfect and still kind of getting it wrong, right? I made space for all parts of myself. So I would encourage you to think perhaps about your narratives, to think about the stories that you tell yourself about yourself. Do you remember at the start of the conversation, I said, today we are going to talk about what I consider to be the most predictive indicator and the most critical element of your success, of your capacity for contribution, of how you show up personally and professionally, of how you will execute on your mission, on how big or small you're going to play in life. And that's self-image. Self-image. It is the way that you see yourself. When you close your eyes and you imagine yourself, that image that you hold of yourself is actually how you are showing up in the world. The image that you hold of yourself in your quiet moments, in those moments when you're alone, in those moments where you're just doing something and your mind wanders and you have this image of yourself, that image that you hold of yourself, my friend, is actually who is showing up in the world. And so if that self-image isn't kind and loving and full of compassion and doesn't make space for all parts of who you are, I want you to know that you are not giving the world the opportunity to see you in your fullness. If you want any support with this, if there's some way that I can help you on this journey towards a deep sense of confidence, towards rewriting those old narratives and really showing up fully and unapologetically, I want you to reach out. You probably know how to find me. I want you to reach out. I would be honored to have a conversation with you. I would be honored to talk through with you what working together would look like. And if you have any questions or comments about what you've just heard, you can drop them below. We will be here. My team is here. And we absolutely love engaging with you guys. All right, my friends, have an amazing, amazing Thursday. And I'll see you next week.